Hey everybody, happy Thursday. Kwesi Graves here. I'm a regional sales leader with LinkedIn Sales Solutions based out of San Francisco. Super pumped to have you guys join us for the second special edition, all virtual, aka the Cribs edition, since we're all home, of Live with Sales Leaders. I'm really excited to introduce our two guests coming around the corner here. But first, a couple housekeeping items before we dive into the recently released LinkedIn State of Sales Report. For those of you guys who are joining us on On24, this is going to be an audio-only session. There's no dial-in, but we're going to do our best to send a recording of the live broadcast within a week of today's event. Also, if you have any audio issues, first thing, make sure you have good old Flash enabled. Refresh your browser, and the recommended browsers for today's session are Chrome and Firefox. In addition, we have a resource box for you guys to download some content. Go crazy. There's a lot of great stuff in there for you to leverage and use after the session today. And during this session, we're also going to have a group of question managers fielding all the things you guys are concerned about, curious about, want to know. We'll have a dedicated portion for Q&A towards the end, but we'll attack most of the questions via the console today. All right, so with that, the State of Sales Report is amazing. Lots of interesting nuggets and insights. We're going to spend our time really on three topics, which are the use and the continuing rise of technology in sales, the use of data and making data-driven decisions, and then lastly, the role LinkedIn plays as a core selling element in our field sales teams. So I want to start by introducing our guest, who I'm super excited for you guys to get to know today. We have Jenny Chu joining us from based in Singapore, but currently in Sydney. And then Trish Bertuzzi in Boston. Actually, I say author Trish Bertuzzi. 2020 is taken away from us. I want to steal none of her shine. Author Trish Bertuzzi, CEO of the Bridge Group, and Jenny, head of sales Asia for Xero. Ladies, welcome. So happy to have you guys.
Thank you.
All right, so let's start with the quick introductions. Tell us a little bit more about your day-to-day job, what you do in your role, and my most favorite part, if you're working with LinkedIn, you got to tell us something that's not on your LinkedIn profile. So Jenny, you're a LinkedIn alum. I'll let you go first.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Good to be here today to spend time. As Kwasi mentioned, I'm ex-LinkedIn. But currently I hold the role of head of sales for Xero Asia. And Xero is actually an Australian-listed cloud-based accounting platform that was actually founded in New Zealand back in 2006. So we have over 2 million subscribers of accountants, bookkeepers, and SMEs worldwide transform the way they do business through the cloud. So every day, my passion is to really help SMEs leverage cloud to get better at what they do. One thing that's not in my LinkedIn profile is that recently I just got off a 14-day quarantine. So sitting in a hotel room by myself without any clue to what's going on in the world, because I actually flew in from Singapore to Sydney and I survived. So there you go.
Awesome. So for those of you guys that don't know, Jenny's in Sydney, okay? It's the middle of the night. Jenny, if I could be as put together and ready to present as you are in the middle of the day, I'd be honored. So thank you for joining us. Really happy to have you here. Trish, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Fantastic, fantastic. So tell us more about you, the Bridge Group, and something fun that's not on your LinkedIn profile.
So I founded the Bridge Group in 1998, focused on inside sales, sales development, anything to do with virtual selling in the B2B tech space. Also the author of the Sales Development Playbook. And let's see, what is not on my LinkedIn profile? It would be my age, and it never will be.
Okay, I got you. Listen, that's one bridge I'm not going to cross. You see what I did there? You got that? You got that? You see that? All right. I'm trying to stay on your good side, both of you. So, hey, thank you so much. One fact that's not on my LinkedIn profile. Gosh, I've done this so many times over the years. Let's see. Okay. Wow. I can't believe I'll tell you guys this. When I was a kid, and embarrassingly enough, sometimes even today, I really, really wanted to be James Bond, like desperately. I would walk around and try to feint and stunt and be really cool, but it didn't really work out. So I'm still happy.
Very close. You're young. There's still the future.
I mean, you know.
Still.
Thank you. I got a chance. I'll take that, Trish. Look at you, firing up already.
So all good.
I love it. I love it. All right. So today we're going to talk about the State of Sales Report. I was super excited to read it. most of us in this profession are kind of nerds about the profession. We want to get better. We want to understand what's going on around the world. And some quick background on the report. So the report itself was this idea of going around the world and taking a pulse, right? So we went around the world, region by region, and interviewed 500 buyers and then 500 sales leaders and or professionals, which ended up culminating about 10,000 people surveyed globally to figure out what's what in our sales world, right? And so we're going to focus on 3 pillars today. We're going to start with the first being the rise of technology in sales. Now, we know technology is important. Sales technology is showing up in various portions of the sales cycle. We even have point tools that help you do this around pipeline and closing deals and recognition and all sorts of things. My general thought on this, ladies, is that technology is super important, but I sort of feel like less is more. Okay. Now I know all the CFOs on the call were like, yes, like less money to spend on technology, but I generally feel like we need to be focused on what works for our field teams. But I'll start with you, Jenny. We're seeing teams now, especially leaders, right, really geared toward helping their field teams succeed, especially in this environment, right? With that, tech stacks are often getting bigger. They're getting a little bit bloated, as we hear from time to time. So how do you think sales leaders should think about optimizing the sales stack for their team such that it doesn't overload them with resources?
I think that's a great question. And, you know, currently with the recent COVID, you know, we're actually so lucky to be living in an age where there's an abundance of sales tools and tech stacks. So if we think about it 10 years ago, how do people do sales? Basic cold calling, building relationships, and making sure that, you know, we're trying to get at as much touch points as possible through the traditional methods. Today, whether it's CRM tools or prospecting, scheduling, video calling, there's an abundance of choices to pick from. So really having enough resources is not the issue. Picking the right tech stack is the issue. Because if you pick the wrong one or you implement it wrongly, it could grow wrongly in the organization. So I was thinking about this the other day, and to really determine what's in the stack, we need to first start determining at what stage your business is in. So whether it's growth or the retention stage, and then really mapping out and visualizing the entire sales process. So at each point, answering the big picture question on what problem are we trying to solve. So a typical problem could be how much time a rep is spending on inefficient practices, and can this tech actually help us? So in terms of, you know, optimizing dollars and resources, Kwasi, you mentioned just now, it really comes down to this phrase I always use for the team. It's really return on investment. So say, for example, if a rep is spending 5 hours a day searching for the right customers to contact, and you had 10 reps, that will be equivalent to like 1,000 hours in a month. And if we flip that around, it could be an opportunity cost of what, 50 million, for example, of additional revenue you can actually get. So really testing that ability to actually save time and solve that process is important. But even more importantly, we don't want to overwhelm the sales team with so much that they don't know which stack to use and which stack to actually prioritize. So it's really important to have a good way to test this out via a pilot program. So before we even run a tech stack in the organization, it's really important to actually roll this out through the wider sales organization by picking a specific segment to test it out. So for example, in Asia, we cover so many different countries. So I'll pick a specific country to say, hey, sales team, why don't we try this? And if it does work well, it will then give us the confidence to actually build a case to the wider sales team to say, this actually worked really well in the last 3 to 4 months. We want to roll this out to the wider team.
Gotcha. No, that's wonderful. So let me flip that question a bit on its head for Trish. Trish, you've worked with hundreds of sales organizations, right, with the Bridge Group, and you know, one of the things I hear when I'm on calls with my team, and this is actually very troubling, is we know technology is important. 97% of the respondents said that technology is important or very important to their success, both as reps and as leaders of these organizations. Now, a lot of organizations, unfortunately, in this current economic climate, Trish, they don't have the resources, right? So they have to make tough decisions on what they can have for their teams and what they might have to give up in order to do so. And so when we think about this, especially with the lens for our inside sales organizations, right? Often our business development teams are the tip of the spear in driving revenue or opportunities that, which lead to revenue for our teams. How can these customers and how can these businesses in these more challenging times really optimize with limited resources? What should they focus on with regard to technology for their teams?
So I come from a very interesting lens since I only sell into B2B tech. So I'm immersed in the tech space and we are enamored of everything tech. But I mean, you have to start with the basics, the foundation of, just what is the level playing field? What are table stakes? And I think table stakes are things like a great CRM, obviously that type of ability to track your customers, your buyers, your process is a critical success factor. I think data is a critical success factor. I say to people every single day, data is the #1 lever you can pull for productivity. So give up headcount if you have to get great data. So that's a critical success factor. And then it depends on where your selling team is focused, what comes after that. I mean, LinkedIn is a given, obviously. If your buyers are LinkedIn participants, that's absolutely a given. You don't need all the bright, shiny toys. You need to start with the basics, get them implemented well, and then move on from there.
Gotcha. No, that's wonderful. And one thing that I think that's come up for both of you guys in this discussion so far, and this actually came to me when flipping through the chapters of your book, Trish. You did a chapter called "Let the Requirements Guide Your Model." I hope I have that correctly. And I thought that was really powerful and so applicable in virtually everything we do. And something I feel like I observe is this disconnect between the way that sales leadership wants to go to market, right? The methodologies, the KPIs, the mindset that we want to instill in our teams versus the tech that we actually purchase for them to use. Like there's a huge disconnect there, right? How can we build that bridge to get everybody on the same page? And I'll go back to you, Trish, because I think quite often, and I love spending time with reps, especially younger reps, inside sales reps. They want things, right? They feel like, hey, I need this to do my job. And my leaders have told me these are the things that's required of me, but the tools I have available don't match, right? How can, for the young folks or the reps who are on this call today with us, how can they advocate for themselves going back to their leadership to tell them, hey, I need this to do my job?
Well, you have to build a business case, right? So just starting with documenting how much time you're spending on tasks that aren't helping you achieve goals, even if it's a scratch pad or a spreadsheet or whatever. It's all about the business case. And everybody loves tech, right? We're a tech obsessed world. So you just have to identify the difference between a toy and a tool, and a business case will allow you to do that.
Love it. Love it. Jenny, you mentioned ROI earlier, and I think this is going to be a key theme for us as we discuss the State of Sales report. So often we see that buyers, and I tell you this, my experience at LinkedIn, when we go back to a customer and we spent a year with them and it's time to renew their agreement, ROI comes up quite often, right? So for those of us who are on the call who need to sell to someone like you, the head of sales at a company, talk to us about the ROI you like to see, the ROI that influences Jenny Chu in making decisions to renew contracts with vendors.
I think ROI comes from many different viewpoints. I think most important to me is the expectations set out at the beginning of the contract. So the reason why I would agree to go with a vendor in the first place is because I see value in that vendor. That's the first thing. The second thing, I actually trust that salesperson. I actually trust that salesperson can actually deliver and what they said that they would. And if we're talking about, say, a 1-year contract, it's important to me to be able to see that value being delivered, broken out into paces, and not just a one-time only at the end of the contract saying, hey, this is actually what we delivered, but this is what we missed out. So having that ongoing relationship throughout that whole sales process, plus after we sign the contract, is really important. And that's why, quarterly business reviews and getting on the right track to make sure that not everything is going to go well, and not everything is going to go perfectly, but making sure that the alignment throughout that process is aligned with both, the salesperson and especially the customer.
Gotcha. I love it. So Trish, let's flip that back to you in a different lens. I am the inside sales leader at my organization, right? I'm a rep. I'm trying to go to club, and I need to sell to Jenny to make this deal happen, right? And another chapter in your book I thought was really interesting was sell to everyone, close no one. I hope I got that right. And what I took from that was this idea of being well threaded, right? Within the organization, we call it multi-threading at LinkedIn, understanding what the different personas and the buyers that we care about. So help a rep think through right now today, right? I have technology. We think Jenny needs this technology. What do I need to do to influence her?
Well, I think Jenny stated it beautifully, and I wish more people would listen to her when she stated, look, if you're asking someone to make a significant investment with you and you're talking to them about the potential benefits that they're going to see throughout the relationship with you, where are those quarterly business reviews? We're so quick to do quarterly business reviews internally to make sure we're making our numbers. Well, what about doing them with our customers to get ahead of any problems, or better yet, to position the big wins that they're getting and maybe they don't even see them? So I love the idea that Jenny put forth about quarterly business reviews with your key customers. And now I lost my train of thought on what the question was.
But I think you nailed it. We're really trying to think through the mindset of both the buyer and the seller here. I think that the State of Sales report was beautiful in its perception of both of those things. And QBRs are great. They're super important. I think how else can we figure out what we're doing if we don't know what problem we're solving for? And I think a QBR is a great resource in doing that. I was on a call a couple weeks ago, and we're talking to SVP of sales operations, and I'm sure we got a bunch of operations leaders on the call today. And I got her requirements for what she was looking for, right? And it was really interesting because she wanted X, Y, and Z. Okay. 3 days later, we talked to her team, the managers, right, and the leaders of the sales team, and they wanted a completely different set of things. So I think the final question I'd ask for you guys here, and Trish, will go back to you, is talk about the disconnect you see between operational teams, right, and the people who are in the field making these things happen. How can we bring people together in terms of technology?
Well, I mean, I think I'm not sure it's our job as the vendor to bring them together, although as part of the sales process, we have to. But when there's a disconnect, it's usually because operations is looking at hard things, numbers, ROI, data. Whereas sales and marketing teams tend to look at softer things, relationships, information, engagement, those type of things. So I think we have to bring the hard and the soft together into at least one, if not more, conversations to make sure that our buyers are having that conversation internally, that we don't need to bite us in the butt later after the deal is done. Gotcha.
No, I love it. Jenny, love your perspective on the same thing.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say I came from a sales operations background as well. So I did a couple of years doing that. And I think sales operations is really crucial to the sales organization. They act as the right hand to sales leadership in terms of being able to bring a holistic system to the selling ground. So they not only drive strategy, but drive the best practices and guide the training and usage of technology to hack the success that we want in sales. And so I think the key here is to ensure that not only the hard and soft metrics are tracked, but both sales and sales operations work hand in hand, that they know everything that's going on in the ground, that they'll be able to understand, whilst we need to track these hard metrics, sales operations also need to understand that it's not all hard metrics that matter. It's all the soft things that matter as well. So if you can get that key clockwork working between sales operations and the sales organization, it will flow much better.
Love it. That's a nice segue into our next pillar, which is data. Trish talked about that earlier. Data is king, right? Mm-hmm. Data-driven or being data-driven has become like the next buzzword or buzz phrase we hear quite often with our customers and with our own organizations. Now, yeah, data is huge in how sales organizations are evaluating decisions. Like 50% of the organizations surveyed in the Global Sales Report talked about using data to assess performance. We know it's critical, okay? But we're living in a different world, ladies. Like life is very, very different. 77% of people, according to the report, are taking more virtual meetings. That's not a shocker to anybody. But a lot of other things are coming about in response to COVID-19 and the shift in the way we work, okay? So Trish, I'm really interested in hearing your perspective on data and how people should be thinking about data differently given the environment that we're working in today.
So pre-COVID,
Mm-hmm.
we sold and marketed broadly, like Gatling gun, sales engagement platforms, beep, 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 spitting out emails. Everybody was using LinkedIn and just sending out in-mails and connection requests, and everything was crazy. We were just out there blasting the world, hoping something would stick. Post-COVID, the companies that are being really smart about making their number are the companies that are really taking a look at where did our revenue come from before? How and why don't we narrow our focus to just go there? So, if you were selling into disrupted industries before, like restaurants, hotels, travel, whatever the case may be, obviously, maybe not such a good idea anymore. So I think people are using data to redefine their total addressable market, their ideal customer profile, the buyer personas within those organizations that can make the real decisions. And, we call it pivoting. People who don't pivot aren't going to make it through this problem we're going through.
Yeah, I agreed. I think that the numbers matter, but what you do with the numbers matters most, right? Jenny, so I think to carry on to Trish's point, we know data is critical, right? 51% of the respondents talked about experiencing or expecting budget cuts within their cycles, okay? That's huge. And I think in addition, we're seeing people being less responsive to outreach in general. And we'll cover that more in our LinkedIn session. But how are you in particular, Jenny, thinking about the way you message to your field teams, particularly in acquisition, about how they should leverage data, knowing that people are less responsive and knowing that they're more busy in their everyday lives?
So I love that Trish mentioned the pivot. I think in the last 6 months or so, every business is pivoting towards what they think will give them sustainability in a market like this. For me, data has always been very important in the sales process. There's no change to it. We will always be using data to assess performance, to see how reps are performing. So metrics like sales conversion rates, average sales cycle, deal sizes, and how many touch points, etc. But COVID has definitely changed the need to use additional data and additional metrics in businesses. And I think it's really important for the wider business and also sales reps to really understand these additional metrics that we have. So right now, sitting at home, we're all working from home. We can't go out and meet customers face to face. And we know that's really important in terms of relationship building. But what we have to do is to rely on virtual selling. And when we rely on virtual selling, the landscape has changed. We have to rely more on digital marketing to get more inbound leads because we can't go out. We have to conduct more webinars. We have to tweak the narrative to ensure that our customers actually feel supported at a time like this. So the different metrics that are being used right now in this situation is really a shift towards, say, number of digital webinars to conversion. Digital marketing spend to every dollar of revenue generated. Increased importance of trial leads because we can't do outbound face-to-face meeting anymore. And the most important right now is to actually measure churn metrics. Because while businesses are going through survivability mode, that churn metrics is important to understand how long they can continue to subscribe in particular for SaaS businesses.
Yep. I have a saying now, I say it to my clients every single day, that retention is the new acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100% agree. So, Jenny, we'll stick with you. And I'm curious, this report is global, right? And so many of us, myself and Trish included, we work with people around the world, and particularly in APAC, right? And I feel there's sometimes a disconnect between understanding the culture of sales here and the culture of sales elsewhere. So when we think about the use of data and its impact on organizations, talk to us about, one, what you see in APAC, and two, maybe how can we be better at working with our clients, customers, and prospects in APAC as well?
I think APAC is a really interesting landscape because whilst it's considered APAC as a region, there are many different countries within APAC, and each country has a different culture. They have a different language. They have a different selling style that we need to incorporate, and they have different wants and needs. At the same time, the GDP levels for different countries and the propensity to buy is different as well. And so when we're looking at doing sales in the different countries, it's not only important to understand the macro landscape of what's happening, the political situation, but at the same time, we have to sell how customers want to buy. And doing so, I think it's really important to sort of divide the APAC region into mature markets and emerging markets. And therefore, you can start to see some kind of pattern from that. And within that, then break it down. But in general, selling is pretty much, scalable throughout the whole globe. It's just a matter of how you tweak the conversations to fit towards the culture and how people want to buy.
I love that. Flex your style by region. I love it. Trish, so I have a mentor / former colleague of mine who, when we talk about data, he once famously said in a meeting, I don't need to see all the darn graphs. This is a guy who goes with his gut and he feels it, right? Now, we have teams, and like you said, data is critical. We have people who spend so much time gathering information. So, I sometimes feel like we're caught in this period of like paralysis by analysis, and we know that from the report globally that 44% of our buyers and talked about sales cycles taking longer, right? They're taking longer. So how do we both leverage data in a smart way, but go with our gut as salespeople to drive results? Talk to us about that.
Well, you have to walk a fine line between gut and data, because gut can only get you so far, especially, these are unprecedented times. We've sold through recessions, we've sold through hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis, you name it, but we have never sold through a pandemic. So this is a global issue, and these are unprecedented times. So you have to have data to help you drive the decisions. I think the gut comes into play in how you interpret that data, right? When we talk about pivoting, some of that, the data is to yay or nay a strategy that you might be putting in front of your management team, or the data might be telling you that, our sales process isn't working anymore. We need to change it, or our buyer persona has gone away, or whatever the case may be. So I think now more than ever, it's a combination of data and gut.
Got it. I love it. And I think we'll use this to pivot toward our next pillar of the report, which is the core role that LinkedIn plays in our selling cycles. And now, granted, I'm the LinkedIn guy, Jenny's LinkedIn alum, but one thing I always coach my teams on, and one thing I take pride in doing myself, is whenever I engage with a customer or a prospect, I try to take my LinkedIn hat off and put their hat on, right? Really try to feel where they are in the sales cycle and their world more broadly. But we know LinkedIn is important. It's critical, right? We know sales reps spend a ton of time on LinkedIn across the globe. And so, Trish, meeting you the other day, in 5 seconds, I could tell that you're a LinkedIn expert, okay? And we often talk about what people need to do on LinkedIn to be successful, but I'd love to flip that a little bit. I'd love to hear from you some of the things that you think people should not be doing. Let's eliminate. Let's hear about some of the don'ts in the process that reps are doing that you think don't serve them well in their sales cycle.
So sending out connection requests that said, you came up in my profile, it's like, hey, thank you for making me feel so special. Or sending someone a connection request, which you might then accept because something about their profile was interesting to you, and then they immediately spam you with a non-personalized, here's what we do, it goes on for 5 paragraphs in mail. So then you have to block them because they just won't stop. So I think LinkedIn is personal, right? We are building our personal networks there. So you need to think about it. It's not email. It's very different from email. It allows for a much higher level of visibility into what your buyers are talking about, commenting on, posting about. You know, one of the first things I do when I target a new company is I go and I look and I see how active my target buyers are on LinkedIn. Because if they're not active, I'm not going to use that channel with them. If they are active, I'm going to do a ton of research and I'm going to use that channel with them. So you have to use it appropriately. It is a fabulous tool, but not if you use it as a spam cannon.
Yeah, I agree. Spam cannon. I'm going to steal that one. That's a good one, by the way. Jenny, building off of what Trish mentioned, you've been at LinkedIn. You know what goes up. You know what's up here. Now, I'm really curious. You know, something that Trish said that really struck me is this personal nature of this. Like right now, I feel like one thing that's missing that you can never find from data is the human experience right now. It's very, very difficult, you know? And with all of us working at home, the blend of work and life just constantly flowing back in, children running across the screen, spouses and partners barging in on your phone calls, it makes life difficult. And we found from the report that 44% of people say that they're less responsive to outreach nowadays. That's huge, right? It's already difficult being in sales. But now 44% of people saying they're less responsive to outreach. What does world-class look like to you in terms of how sales reps use LinkedIn today, given this environment?
Yeah, I think first of all, before a sales rep chooses to use LinkedIn, they need to understand the membership base that's available on LinkedIn. So I'll challenge you, Kwasi, a little bit there. So if, say, I was in the medical field and I was selling to, say, doctors and nurses, is this the right platform to actually be using to target doctors and nurses? Do doctors and nurses maybe actually use LinkedIn a lot? Maybe yes, maybe no, but really look at the profiles that we want to target and seeing whether LinkedIn is the best source of people to be able to target there. However, if we're talking about the B2B SaaS space, LinkedIn will be great. It's a great source for personalization, prioritization, and also brand building. And you talk about it's so difficult right now to get the attention of buyers today. And that's absolutely true. That's where personalization comes a lot in. So like Trish mentioned, just spamming everybody won't work. You've got to do the extra hard work now, which is really going into mutual connections, really seeing who you can connect to somebody to make that introduction for you, because that is key. And relationships matter all the time. And so when you have that mutual connection to be able to introduce you to that prospect, it makes it easier. I also talk about brand building. So if you're not out there actually pushing out your brand, nobody knows you. Nobody knows whether they can trust you. Nobody knows what your expertise are. And therefore, how would they even buy from you? So using LinkedIn as a media tool to actually push out articles, to give yourself that expert or thought leadership branding within your field is also really important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Trish, I think I'd love you to pick up there a little bit, especially with this idea of brand. So for example, when we were introduced, I went to your LinkedIn profile naturally. And in about 10 seconds, I had a very good sense of who you were, what you were about, and what value you and your organization lean in to provide people, right? But unfortunately, it's missing from tons and tons of salespeople. I think working at LinkedIn for years, it's one of the #1 mistakes I see from a brand building perspective, especially at the rep level. We're all about talking about the accolades, how many times I go to club and how much I crush percentage of quota, right? But in reality, our buyers don't care, right? So talk to us a little bit about how to build a successful brand as a user of LinkedIn that speaks to the people you want to sell to.
Oh, my hot button.
I'm ready. I'm ready. Give it to me.
Right. So that particular topic is a double-edged sword. Like, I think just my personal opinion, personal branding for sales reps is one of the biggest train wrecks that has ever come down the pike. Expecting SDRs and AEs to go out and build a personal brand when they can barely get their work done, and when they just don't either have, it takes a certain personality type to want to do that, right? So personal branding to me on LinkedIn is, it can go one way or the other. You're either going to get it right or you're going to be a train wreck, and you got a 50-50 shot at best.
Gotcha.
Having said that, you can engage with your buyers in a very meaningful way. Like if you are targeting a company and you have a specific set of buyers, follow them on LinkedIn. They may, if they're active and you see them share something, comment on it or send them an email. Say, hey, I saw that you cared about this topic. I do too. And by the way, here's more information, or whatever the case may be. There is a way to engage with your buyers that isn't me-centric, that is them-centric, and that LinkedIn opens that door to personalization like no other technology can.
Got it. So since we don't want to be on train wrecks, what are some of the things you see from a branding perspective that reps overreach? Talk to us about that. What should we not be doing?
Okay. My latest rant. You're pushing the buttons.
I'm trying to push them. Let's get it.
Are those, and it's not just reps, it's also thought leaders, are those long posts where it's a sentence and then white space and a sentence and then white space and it looks like a haiku. Where are we going with this? And then with 42 emojis in it. I'm like, you're a 50-year-old man. You look like a 2-year-old with a new sticker book. Calm down with the emojis. Like, LinkedIn used to be people really, really sharing incredibly valuable information. And I think now sometimes it's become, hey, I'm going to figure out this algorithm. White space seems to work. So do emojis. I don't really have a lot to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. And there you go.
Gotcha. The message, the real message that should be speaking to the people you care about is getting lost in the shuffle of the emojis.
Thank you.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's shift a little bit on this topic of LinkedIn. There's so many do's and don'ts. Jenny, we see, again, this world where people are less likely to respond. They're busy. They got to juggle it all. We're all juggling it all more than ever, okay? But at the same time, we know it's super, super important to get this right. And so what I feel like I see in buyers nowadays more than ever is this need to be thoughtful. And this is a question I'll pose to both of you guys. Like, you're engaging with people, you see their kid run across the screen, they got to be at soccer, hopefully in like 10 minutes. I really worry about reps recognizing this, right? Because we're all so driven in hitting our goals. What does a thoughtful seller look like to you in this environment today? And how can people use LinkedIn to be more thoughtful in the way they engage with their prospects and their buyers?
I think it comes back down to what we spoke about earlier, utilizing whatever tools that you have and gaining insights from those tools. So be it, the historical performance of CRM data, how the prospect is behaving on LinkedIn, what you can actually find on other social media, and compressing it all into getting a greater understanding of the prospect itself. And when you do that, it's important to then very quickly be able to summarize or be able to get a hypothesis out to say, hey, this prospect's behavior is like that. This is probably what they want. And therefore, when I'm talking to them, I don't go through the BANT, the budget authority time needs approach. Rather, I speak to them from a relationship basis. And with all the information that I now have as insights, how do I then narrow it down into, say, a 10, 15-minute conversation where I can really hit the nail on the head. Because at the end of the day, there's so many salespeople now sort of working from home that actually want the attention of buyers. So if you're able to summarize and get the hypothesis out, you can attract that attention very quickly.
Got it. Trish, I love your input on thoughtfulness as well in today's environment.
Well, I think I love what Jenny said, to be honest with you. I think more than ever, people want us to be succinct and just get to the point. the purpose of this communication is, the purpose of this is, like, just get to the point, because they're inundated with so much noise that if you can make your point super succinctly and it hones in on something that they care about, you're going to rise to the top of all the other messages that are, we are the leading provider of, or whatever the case may be. So I think she nailed it when she was talking about being succinct.
I'm right there with you. So let's jump into a topic with LinkedIn on the side here as a backdrop that I found really interesting / troubling, something I've always found troubling about our profession. So, in this environment with COVID impacting everything, 43% of organizations said that they're using customer satisfaction as their true north metric to figure out whether they're doing well or not. Okay, makes sense. We care about what people care about. Now, when you think about satisfied customers, Jenny said something earlier that was really key, which is this concept of trust. Okay. Now, unfortunately, only 40% of respondents on the buyer side of the global sales report would describe their sales professionals as trustworthy. Okay. i.e., 60% of them don't think that their sales reps are trustworthy. That's a huge problem. And it gets worse. Okay. 25% of those people seem to think that sales as a profession is morally and ethically challenged. Okay, so now we're sending our field teams out. I might send a rep out. Jenny might send a rep out on a call, and they have a 1 in 4 chance of the person on the other line thinking they're trying to steal their 401k. Okay, we're up against it, and now we're dealing with people who are also struggling in the day-to-day aspect of their ordinary lives. So I want to talk about this concept of trust and how important it is, and we'll start with you, Trish. High level, like, what are some things we can do to build trust with our buyers in an authentic way as possible?
Add value.
Yeah.
And give stuff away for free. Like, if you have great content, give it away. Don't gate it. Build it into your sequences. Build it into your outreach. Show, empathy, credibility. Those are the forerunners of trust. And building empathy and establishing credibility doesn't have to be mano and mano. It can be through sharing content, videos, or whatever the case may be. But to do that, you need to know your buyer and know what they care about. But I think the trust issue isn't a flip the switch situation. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You have to start early and stay steady on that path.
Gotcha. Jenny, what are your thoughts on this?
I think trust is really crucial to any sales flow. And I think a salesperson needs to have the appropriate EQ on when to bring up the sales process. So for example, right now, if we're talking to existing customers, you don't want to be pushing to them that, please buy this now, etc. You want to be there to actually support them through this journey, because it's tough and trying times. And so the conversations that you have and ongoing conversations that you have is really important to be able to know what to say, when to say it, and then be able to see when you can actually add value. And is there a problem you're really trying to solve, or are you just hitting numbers? So at the end of the day, if you are a trustworthy salesperson, word will get out. And the best sales is always through referrals, right? So I've actually delivered value. Therefore, please meet so-and-so. He's actually been able to help me out in this way. So it's a long-term play, but one that's very fruitful at the end of the day.
Gotcha. Now, I'm with you guys 100%. I see this all the time. And, especially in today's environment, I think transparency is everything. I think you guys both touched through those themes. Trish, you mentioned being concise. Right now, when I get on the phone with sales leaders, when I'm on the work with my reps, we try to keep it as real as possible. No one has time for nonsense nowadays. They need to know why you're there, what you want, and what it has to do with them, period. Right. And going back to these themes of thoughtfulness, recognizing what's going on around you in these surroundings. I had a rep of mine who on a call, we were speaking to this SVP of sales, and his super adorable 2-year-old scurries by the screen, and she pauses and is wearing a Mickey Mouse hat. you know? And we sent, after the call, we sent him a little hat for her in a different color, and she loved it. His wife actually sent an email to us thanking us, you know? So I think that being clear, being transparent, but also recognizing what's going on in these environments, the people that we're selling to, is more important than ever, truly. So this has been a great discussion on these 3 pillars. I love the dialogue. Thank you two so much for this. With about 15 minutes left to go, we're gonna pause here. One quick ask, towards the end of the session, we're gonna have a survey. We'd love for you guys to complete it, but we wanna take some questions. And so I know some questions have been answered through the console so far, but everyone loves Q&A. So I am going to open up my phone here and gather a couple, and we'll throw them out. All right. Let's see here. We've got, okay, first one. I find that many of the sales organizations in which I've worked, management loves reports and data. Okay, unfortunately, some ask the wrong questions of the available data, aka stepping over dollars to chase dimes. Please walk us through the sales cycle from approach to close of selling management on best practices, on the best practices questions they should be asking.
Oh, that's super easy.
Let's do it.
I'll take that one. Hire the bridge group. Done. There you go. That's what we do.
Bring in the bridge group. Trish, give us a teaser on, without giving the house away for free, though we'll give something away for free. Give us a teaser on how the bridge group is going to help people address that, and also more broadly for the audience on how they can tackle this.
So I think a lot of times, whoever asked the question asked it very appropriately. Sometimes especially pre-COVID, we were so focused on activity that we weren't looking for opportunity in the data that we were looking at. We were like, is everybody doing what they're supposed to be doing? Making calls, sending emails, taking meetings, that we were missing the fact that, wait a second, this person's activity is low, but they're talking to 3 Fortune 500 companies, and let's see if we can help them, escalate that sales process. So I totally get that part. I think another way people look at data to the detriment of the sales process is in assuming you can only have one process. Like if you're selling to SMB, mid-market, and enterprise, you better have 3 different processes in place, because they are completely different markets that should have different metrics, different data, different messages, you name it. So going out vanilla, I think, shoots everyone in the foot, and not looking at the right data most assuredly shoots everyone in the foot.
I love it. Jenny, anything to add there?
I think, when sales management churns out the reports, it's important as sales leaders to make sure that the metrics that are being used make sense, not only from a management point of view, but it's also clearly communicated to the reps on the field on why these are being used. So it's not just data, but insights and how these numbers and this data can actually be used to help them in their day-to-day. I think that's a key linkage that needs to be done as responsible sales leaders.
Oh, and your sales operations background just came through, Jenny.
Sure did.
All sales executives spend some time in ops first.
Yeah, it's important. I think it goes back to that same theme. Let the requirements guide your model. Jenny just nailed it. It makes perfect sense, right? But I also think reps, and I'm assuming this was a rep who wrote this question, I find the most successful reps are often challengers. And don't be afraid to challenge the leaders in your organizations. If you're tasked with being the tip of the spear and making it happen in your organization, you're giving your all and you're producing, leaders need to hear this feedback. So I agree with you both there. All right, next question. Back to our first pillar. What type of technology is important, and does our constant debate decide what's important, or does that shift? So if I think I understand the question here, what type of technology is important? I'll take a first stab at this. Listen, I think it all depends on what you're doing, right? And you take a sales rep, and I've been a sales rep. We've all been in the field at some point. You give a sales rep a choice between 10 tools. Well, they'll take all 10 if somebody else is paying for them, right? That's exactly what happens, and they'll probably end up using only 2, right? So it goes back to this theme for me in the field of understanding what we're trying to get done, right? So at LinkedIn, for example, in my segment, my business, we care deeply about customer interaction via phone calls, right? We want interactions with customers, as many as possible. So we have technology that supports that, right? Tools that help us find the right people to talk to, i.e. LinkedIn, right? But tools that help us understand how those conversations are going, right? Are we talking too much? Are we listening well? What are our skills of discovery, right? Are there themes and execution that we could leverage that can make us better people? And so our tech stack is geared towards that, right? So I'd be interested to hear what you ladies have to say. But for me, it's not so much of a debate, because I think debate ends up with these bloated tech stacks that Jenny talked to us about how to avoid, right? One person wants this, one person wants this, one person wants that. If we're all on the same page, we know what our requirements are, we know they should guide our model, then we should have technology that fuels that. But I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
I think I totally agree with you. You know, it's important to know what is the problem we're trying to solve. But more importantly, how do the customers want to buy? So we touch upon, you know, APAC being such a vast region. Over here, instant communication is really important. So say, for example, live chat. They need live chat, or they actually use WhatsApp to be able to communicate to our sales reps. And if we don't have the right technology to facilitate how the customers want to buy and how they want to be treated, there's a gap there that we need to plug. So really understanding what the customer's needs are, and then really understanding how the reps can facilitate those is important for the tech stack.
Got it. Love it. Trish, you want to chime in on that?
I think you guys pretty much summed it up beautifully.
Let's do it. Let's do it. All right. So, hey, Trish, this one's for you. We'll start with you because you mentioned this earlier. This sounds like, I'm going to assume, coming from someone from the field. How can we start the conversation of a quarterly business review with our customers and clients? And I'll give a little bit of a backdrop there. Let's remember the report. 44% of people are less responsive now. 77% of people across the world are on more Zoom calls, right? We are more distracted than ever, but we know that the QBRs and being in tune with our customers, our buyers, our prospects is still very critical. So back to the question, Trish, how can we get this idea of a quarterly business review done in the thoughtful way that we talked about?
I would build it into my statement of work. So I would build it into my master service agreement, my contract, whatever your process is for how you bring this to fruition legally. Put in that part of the agreement is quarterly business reviews. You can even put in tentative dates with your buyer persona, but I would make it part of the process. So it doesn't look like an add-on, and you're not asking for something that was outside of expectations. It was built into the sales process, into the legal process, and is documented so everyone's expectations are well set. Got
it. Jenny?
I would definitely agree with that. So coming back to, you know, managing expectations. So once a contract is signed, what do I expect? At this specific timeline, what would we expect to do? How do we then implement the solution that we have sold to you? And also making sure that in the quarterly business review, that it is of value to the client. So of value meaning getting the right decision makers, getting the right stakeholders into that meeting to make it short, sharp, and sweet, to say that this is the expectations, this is delivery, how do we go forward from here, and getting that alignment along the way.
Short, sharp, and sweet. I love it. That dials right into what Trish mentioned of the importance of being really concise nowadays, right? With the buyer who's busier than ever. Another question I thought was great, back to our pillar on data. What data have you all seen the most useful in helping with increasing retention? And Trish, you talked about this. I'm going to lob this to you first, right? You mentioned that how critical retention is, but often in surveying customers, we are seeing the customer is uncertain in what they want, which makes data-driven decisions more difficult.
I got lost in that question. I'm sorry. I'm being dense. Help me.
No, it's worded interestingly, but I'll play it back for you. So What data have we all seen most useful in helping to increase retention? And the idea being that, like, we care about retention, it's critical, but right now customers in this wild world are sort of all over the place sometimes, right? So what sort of things that we think about from a data perspective that help us increase retention?
So if you're a tech provider, you can see usability stats. So you know where someone stands in their implementation process, whether or not they're using your technology. So I think that would be a forward-leaning indicator is, are they in fact vested in what you're doing? One point I would like to make about customer retention is that in this day and age, the person you sold to might not be there the next day. And maybe a month from now, there's another person in their seat who is now in charge of whatever you sold to them. So keeping your finger on the pulse of the buyers at your organizations has become exponentially a critical success factor if you're in sales, especially as it pertains to retention.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think one quick chime on this question is, for me, if you're lost on what your buyer wants, you may have not known it from the beginning, right? And you know, what people are solving for is really all that matters. And I think to your point, Trish, we have to constantly do discovery. I hate this idea of I do discovery once and I go run down the field and go slam my wall into a solution. It's absolutely not that way. We have to constantly be poking at what the core pillar, what the big rock that they're trying to attack is, and validate that with every single person we talk to. But it's a difficult thing.
Well, talking about technology that enables just that, I mean, I think you alluded to it before, but conversational intelligence tech. Yeah. So recording discovery calls, recording QBRs, recording any conversation that's a critical conversation with your prospects and buyers, and then sharing that across your selling team and your account management team so everyone's on the same page. It's easy peasy nowadays if you have the tech. We're just not all doing it.
Indeed, indeed. And one thing that we do, a couple of things we do at LinkedIn, I think has been very successful, and Jenny, you'll be familiar with these things, is adoption, right? Adoption from the gate is really important. But when you have a new relationship, setting true north in terms of what success looks like, and getting agreement across the board, right? So it's not just the one person who will talk to me that I get agreement on what he or she says. It's everybody, right? So having a defined set of goals across the organization in terms of what true north and what success means for that business is great, because, you know, Trish, you said it best. People are going to leave. Priorities are going to change, especially in these smaller SaaS businesses. Priorities are constantly shifting because the environment is constantly shifting. So starting strong is really important in terms of what we're aiming for and how we're going to measure that. Here's an interesting one. As a CEO, I get so many requests to connect on LinkedIn. Guilty. It turns into spam. Okay. How do I manage the inbound requests more easily? And why would I want to encourage my sales teams to be on LinkedIn? So I have a perspective, but Jenny, I'll start with you on that one.
First of all, I think it comes down to salespeople not spamming people on LinkedIn. I think it gives a bad impression on salespeople. But, you know, as a CEO, I would start looking at, like, one of the things that we shouldn't be doing is adding everybody on LinkedIn or connecting to everybody that wants to connect to us. So it's important to actually have the right set of mutual connections and the right set of connections on LinkedIn. That's number one. And number two, I guess only reply to those that actually make sense, those that everybody wants a CEO's attention. What kind of personalized message, or do I trust this person to even sort of bother to reply at the end of the day? So it's sort of a catch-22, you know. LinkedIn is there to facilitate connections and to facilitate business, but people can actually flip it around to use it in different ways.
Yeah, well, we got a CEO on the call. So Trish, talk us through this. You get a ton of requests. How do you deal with them?
So it's interesting. So I only accept connections from people who wrote a really great personalized message, or, and I'm not going to give the number away, but I have a certain number of mutual connections that is sort of my rule of thumb. If I share X number of connections with that person, I will accept their request.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's great guidance. I've talked to a lot of leaders about this. I spoke to a CRO about a month ago. We were working on a big pilot, and he mentioned that once he got a C in his title, LinkedIn became a lot less fun for him. And I told him that he was in control, right? And ultimately, to the person who wrote this question, you are still in control. It's the nature of the beast. You get a C in front of your title, your activity inbound on LinkedIn is going to increase. But I tell people to reject and delete liberally, don't be afraid. You know, the quality of your network is up to you on LinkedIn. The more times you accept those requests that you don't have mutual connections to, that people are just trying to get either mine your own connections or dilute the quality of your network, we shouldn't be afraid to pass on those people, right? And, you know, to the reps thinking about this, I think the other side of the question is, you know, a connection, this is just my opinion, a connection-based outreach strategy is one that is not always going to work. It's certainly not necessarily sustainable, right? You know, if you get enough people that say they don't know you on LinkedIn, then you're going to be banned from being able to connect with people, right? So I think to Trisha's point, one thing that we should all be doing is if we're going to reach out to someone we don't know, try to do it through a warm introduction first. Jenny mentioned that, like, there's got to be a path in often if you mine your network enough. And if there isn't, right, write that thoughtful message and keep it clear and concise, right? The field team should be on LinkedIn. They should be reaching out to people. But in this day and age where people are super busy, less likely to respond, be authentic, be clean. What was it you said, Jenny? Sharp, sweet. I can't remember the last piece.
Short, sharp, and sweet.
Short, sharp, and sweet. I love it. Let's see here. We got one more question I think we have time for. So what are the advantages you have found for sales in the new COVID world? Advantages. We're flipping on its head.
Well, for me, it's more time.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about the number of hours we commute to work pre-COVID, we go maybe half an hour in the morning, another 45 minutes back or an hour back. That's at least an hour and a half that you actually save per day. You multiply that by every day, multiply that by the last couple of months. You get that time, that the extra time that you never had before. And so that time could actually be used in doing different things. It could be used in terms of, you know, doing more prospecting. But as we sit in this COVID world, I find that it gets very stressful sitting in front of a screen all the time and thinking about work because we are always working from home.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, taking a different perspective and using that time to reinvest in yourself is important. I don't think we'll ever get a chance like this again to actually sit at home and work like this. And so I was also reading the report that LinkedIn Learning has gone up tremendously in stats post-COVID. So people are actually using that time to invest in building their professional knowledge to become better people over time.
I love it. Trish?
Totally on the Jenny bus, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
I think people are taking the time to invest in honing their crafts. Like just by the outreach I'm getting, more and more people, you know, what books can you recommend? I'm seeing companies start book clubs. More and more people are offering free sales training. There is a ton of amazing free sales training out there nowadays. So I think people, you know, before it was like crazy, crazy, crazy. And now people are saying, oh, wait a second. I am going to take an hour today to attend that webinar, or I am going to take an hour to read that book, or whatever the case may be. So I do agree with Jenny that that's the biggest advantage.
I too am on the Jenny bus, 100% on that. I think investment in self and others is great. You know, we have additional bandwidth. Some of us do, right? I know children in life can be complicated, but if you're not commuting, hopefully, if you have an extra half an hour that's saved from doing that, that investment in self and others is so key. And also recognizing that in the people you're trying to sell to, right? Being interested about what they're doing, you know, sending books to customers, right? As a gift or something to be thoughtful as a touch point is another great idea. So we are out of time. This has gone by so quickly. Thank you guys so much for doing this. Jenny Chu of Xero, head of sales. So happy to see you guys. Best way to get in contact with both Trish and Jenny is through LinkedIn. So reach out to them. Make sure you do it in the right way, and we'll get you guys connected. Thank you once again. Please take the survey at the end of this, and we look forward to seeing you guys soon on the next Live with Sales Leaders. Have a great day, everybody. Be safe out there.